All right, so you know how sometimes you get like this kind of itch to figure out how stuff works,
Hmm.
but you don't want to like dig through all those super technical manuals or drop a ton of cash on fancy tools?
Oh, yeah, I totally feel that.
Well, today on the deep dive, we're tackling that exact kind of curiosity. We're going to dive into how to build a basic glass bubbler pipe at home. And I'm telling you, it's way more straightforward than you might think.
Oh, for sure. It's a great way to learn.
Right. It's like a crash course on water filtration and how to get a smoother experience. And the best part is you probably already have most of the stuff you need just lying around your house.
Exactly. Like, it's amazing what you can do with everyday objects when you start thinking outside the box.
Right. Have you ever like looked at an empty pasta sauce jar and been like, I bet I could?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
You start to see the potential in everything.
Seriously. And that's what we're going to tap into today. We're talking small glass bottles, jars, maybe that forgotten pickle jar in the back of your cupboard could be
Oh,
perfect.
yeah.
So in this deep dive, we'll break down the core parts that make a bubbler work. We'll explore using a simple glass jar, a downstem, which could be anything from a metal tube to even a sturdy plastic straw, and then how to make it airtight with heat-resistant tape or some non-toxic adhesive. And of course, we got to make a bowl and a mouthpiece too.
It really makes you think about the how and why of it all. Like, why does passing smoke through water make it smoother? This DIY project is a super hands-on way to grasp that.
Absolutely. So our goal today is pretty simple. We want to give you the know-how to make a functional homemade glass bubbler using stuff you can easily find. Okay, so first things first, what kind of stuff do we actually need?
The cool thing is that the materials are so accessible. I bet a lot of folks listening already have most of this at home.
For real, the shopping list is super short. So first up, a clean glass jar or bottle. The key here is that it doesn't leak. Think jam jars, those small juice bottles, even a sturdy spice container. Anything that holds water without a problem.
Makes sense.
Then you need something for the downstem. A hollow tube, basically. A metal straw, some aluminum tubing from the hardware store would work great. And for the bowl, we can get creative. A metal cap or even some heavy-duty foil can do the trick for now. And don't forget something to seal everything up. Heat-resistant tape or non-toxic epoxy will be your best friends. And of course, we need water for the filtration.
I mean, when you break it down, you're essentially building a super simplified version of those fancy filtration systems, right? But the core idea of how the smoke interacts with the water stays the same.
Exactly. Now, if you want to get a little fancy and have a cleaner finish, some of the sources mention using a small power drill with a glass drill bit. Totally optional for a basic working bubbler, but it can help make those holes look nice and neat.
Yeah, but if you are going to go the drilling route, got to be careful with the glass. Use the right technique so you don't end up with a bunch of cracks.
Oh, absolutely. Safety first. But yeah, let's stick with the basics for now. The most basic setup is just the jar, the metal tube and water. Super simple. So you start by giving your jar a good rinse, get rid of any leftover gunk. Then you got to make a hole near the top of the jar for your downstem. You can carefully pierce it, or if you have the tools, drill it. The goal is to make a snug fit for your metal tube in that hole and then seal up any gaps. That's where the non-toxic adhesive or tape comes in, making sure there's no way for air to escape. Next up, you got to make a bowl. A metal cap or even some thick foil shaped just right can do the trick. And lastly, you add water to the jar, but make sure the water level is below where the end of your downstem will sit. You don't want the water going up the tube. So yeah, you add your material to the bowl and you're basically good to go.
It's pretty wild how those simple steps basically recreate
Yeah.
what those crazy expensive devices do.
Right.
The smoke goes to the water, gets cooled down, and some of the heavier stuff gets trapped.
Boom, science. So when you're putting it all together, keep a few things in mind for safety and ease. One tip is to use jars with thicker glass walls. They're less likely to crack if they get a little warm. Now, you're not going to be blasting it with a torch like in glass blowing, but it's always smart to handle glass with care. Sudden temperature changes or being rough with it can cause it to break. So if the jar does feel a bit warm, just let it cool down slowly.
It's a good reminder that even in a simple DIY project, you got to respect the materials you're working with.
Yeah, for sure. Another super important thing is making sure you have a tight seal around the downstem where it goes into the jar. That seal has got to be airtight. Otherwise, you'll get air leaks and the smoke won't be forced through the water properly. You'll end up with weak hits and won't get the filtration you're after.
Huh?
So take your time and get that seal nice and solid with that non-toxic epoxy or silicone sealant.
Right, because it's all about that airflow.
Totally. And then the length of your downstem matters too.
Yeah.
It needs to go down about an inch or two below the water line inside the jar. That's what makes the smoke bubble through the water.
And those bubbles are where the magic happens, right? That's a big part of the filtration process because it creates more surface area for the smoke to interact with the water.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the bowl. For a simple DIY option, a metal bottle cap or a clean stainless steel socket from the hardware store can work really well. Just make sure whatever you use is clean and safe to heat. You can either attach it right on top of the downstem, or depending on your jar, sometimes you can even attach it to the jar's lid.
Yeah, and it's worth repeating. Always use clean materials, especially when you're going to be applying heat. You don't want to breathe in any nasty stuff.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Now, I'll admit, this DIY bubbler might not be winning any beauty contests compared to those professionally made water pipes. But it's a killer way to understand how water filtration works. You get to see the science in action.
It's like taking a peek behind the curtain.
Exactly. And hey, if this sparks a real passion, you can always level up later. Maybe even look into custom glass blowing or wholesale suppliers. Some folks even mention places like Clover Glass. Maybe they even have a warehouse in LA for faster shipping if you ever wanted to, open your own shop or something.
So you start with the basics,
Yeah,
get a feel for it, and then you can branch out into the more professional stuff if you want.
totally. Okay, so you gathered your materials. Now it's time for the more hands-on part, prepping and putting it all together. Think of it like a mini engineering project where every step gets you closer to a working bubbler.
It's all about the process.
Right. Okay, so step one, give that glass jar another good rinse. Then you got to mark the spot where your downstem's going to go, usually about an inch below the rim. Now comes the tricky part, carefully making that hole, either by drilling or puncturing. Take your time and be super careful. Once you've got the hole slide in your downstem, your metal straw or tube, and then make sure it fits nice and snug. Seal up any gaps with that heat-resistant tape or epoxy. Now add your bowl, that heat-resistant cap or foil, making sure it sits comfortably on top of the downstem. Almost there. Fill the jar with water, making sure the end of your downstem is submerged. Tighten everything up and then give it a gentle test. How's the airflow?
One thing that's often mentioned is angling the downstem a little bit. It uses gravity to help guide the smoke down into the water for better filtration.
Oh, that's a great point. And yeah, the sources go into more detail about the assembly.
Yeah.
After you clean the jar, they really stress making sure there aren't any cracks or chips. Even tiny ones can get worse with a bit of heat or pressure, and you definitely don't want your bubbler breaking while you're using it. Right. When you're marking where to put the downstem hole, they suggest you try to imagine how it'll feel when you take a hit. You want it to be at an angle that feels natural and comfortable. And if you're using a jar that's rounder near the top, putting that hole just slightly off-center can sometimes make the airflow better overall.
It's crazy how those tiny tweaks can actually change how well the bubbler works.
It's all about the details. Now about drilling. If you decide to go that route for a cleaner look, definitely use a standard hand drill. But, and this is super important, you got to use a special drill bit that's made for glass. And here's a pro tip, keep the spot you're drilling wet. This helps cool things down and prevents the glass from getting too hot and cracking. Drill slow and steady and don't press too hard. Some people also talk about heating up a sharp metal tool on the stove and using that to make the hole, but the sources warn that this is way riskier and you're much more likely to crack the jar. So yeah, I'd avoid that method.
Yeah, the wet drilling technique is pretty standard when you're working with delicate materials like glass. It helps reduce stress on the material.
For sure. So once you've got your hole and you slide in your metal tube, it might be a little loose or wobbly. To fix that and make sure you have that airtight seal, you can use some heat-resistant silicone or even aquarium sealant. Just make sure you give it plenty of time to dry and set before you try using your bubbler.
Right. You got to let that sealant do its thing.
And then there's the bowl placement. You want it easy to load, but not so low that it's getting splashed by the water every time you take a hit. Some people even add a little extension to the top of the downstem to keep things extra dry.
Smart thinking.
Okay, finally, the moment of truth, the leak test. Fill up the jar with water so that the downstem is submerged by about an inch. Then gently inhale from the opening of the jar, or from the mouthpiece if you added one. If you hear a nice gurgling sound, you're golden. That means you've got a good seal and the air is being pulled through the water like it should. But if you hear any whistling or hissing, that's a sign that air is escaping somewhere, probably around the downstem or where the other parts connect. Go back and reinforce those seals until those sounds go away. At this point, you've basically got a working homemade bubbler. It might not be the prettiest thing in the world, but it's proof that you get the science behind water filtration.
And gives you a much better understanding of those more complex pieces.
Totally. All right, so you've built your bubbler. Now let's talk about some common mistakes to avoid. Even a project this simple can go wrong if you're not careful.
Knowing what to watch out for is super helpful.
Oh, definitely. The biggest mistake people make is rushing the process. Skipping steps like measuring carefully can lead to all sorts of problems like misaligned holes, awkward angles that make it hard to use, and of course those pesky air leaks. Take your time and do it right. Another common issue is using cheap tape or glue. It might seem fine at first, but it can break down over time, especially when it gets a little hot or wet, and that leads to air leaks. And you wouldn't believe how many people forget to properly clean their jar and downstem before they even start putting things together. You don't want any unwanted flavors or bacteria messing up your experience.
Cleanliness is key for anything you're going to be inhaling from.
Preach. So the sources really emphasize those basic prep steps. Always make sure your jar and downstem are clean and completely dry before you do any drilling or sealing. And that careful measuring we talked about earlier, super important. If the holes are even a little bit off, it can mess up the angle of the downstem and you might end up with water splashing into your mouth when you try to use it. And don't just grab any old tape or glue you have lying around. Cheap adhesives can come loose pretty easily when they get exposed to heat or moisture.
Yeah, you really don't want those seals failing.
So true. Then there's the whole water level thing. People think more water equals better filtration, but if you fill the jar too high, you're going to get a mouthful of water. And if you don't use enough water, the smoke won't have enough contact with the liquid and you won't get the benefits of the filter. So the sweet spot is to submerge the end of the downstem just enough so it bubbles nicely without the water creeping up the tube.
Yeah, you got to find that Goldilocks zone.
Exactly, and don't forget about the jar itself. The thickness of the glass matters. If the walls are too thin, even a little bump or temperature change can cause it to crack. Choose sturdier jars like the ones that come with sauces, jams, or juices. They tend to be more durable.
Yeah, the thicker the glass, the less likely it is to break under pressure.
Okay, this is super important. Be really picky about the types of tapes and glues you use. Cheap ones can release bad fumes when they get heated, or they might not hold up over time. The sources recommend looking for tapes that are specifically labeled as heat-resistant or epoxies that are designed to handle higher temperatures. If you're not sure, a good rule of thumb is to look for stuff that's used for sealing tobacco pipes or even aquariums because those are designed for more demanding environments.
Right, you got to prioritize your health and make sure you're not breathing in any harmful stuff.
Definitely. So yeah, more water isn't always better. Overfilling can lead to that nasty splashback, and not enough water means the smoke doesn't get filtered properly. The trick is to submerge the downstem just enough to get those bubbles going without the water coming up the tube. And lastly, don't forget the finishing touches. Once you've put everything together, give it a test. Listen carefully for any whistling or hissing sounds. That usually means there's an air leak, probably around the downstem or where the bowl connects. Just keep resealing those spots until the sound goes away. And cleanliness is key too. Dirty water or gunk can build up fast in these homemade bubblers, and that can totally change the flavor of whatever you're using. A quick rinse with mild soap after each use will make a world of difference.
Yeah, you want to keep your bubbler clean for the best flavor and to avoid any buildup.
Absolutely. So even though this is a pretty simple DIY project, paying attention to these common mistakes can make your experience way better and make your homemade bubbler work way better too. And you know what? This whole process can actually be super valuable if you ever decide to get into more advanced designs like those custom glass pieces, or even making your own designs to sell. It's a great foundation for understanding the whole world of smoking accessories.
Totally. It's like a gateway to a whole new world.
So now let's say you've had fun making these homemade bubblers, and maybe you're thinking about getting something a little fancier, or maybe you even run a smoke shop and you're looking for a reliable source for glass products. This brings us to wholesale support and where to find more glass supplies.
Finding trustworthy suppliers is key if you want to expand your options or even start a business.
Exactly. The sources say it's important to find suppliers who know how to handle big shipments and deal with all the custom stuff. They should also be good at packaging, especially for fragile things like glass. It's also a huge bonus if they have a warehouse that's close to where you are. Like if they have a distribution center in a big city like LA, that can mean way faster delivery times for customers across the US. And don't forget about support after you buy. If something happens during shipping, it's good to know if the supplier will replace or refund damaged stuff, or if they have extra accessories you can buy.
Yeah, those logistics are super important for any business that sells physical products, especially delicate stuff that has to travel long distances.
So the sources recommend looking for reputable glass manufacturers or distributors that have a good selection of water pipes, bongs, and other smoking accessories. A good supplier will usually offer different options like picking up stuff from their warehouse if you're nearby, different shipping methods for big orders, and an easy way to place orders. It's also important to understand their payment terms, like they might ask for a 30% deposit up front and
Yeah.
then the rest of the money before they ship your order. And if you're dealing with a supplier in another country, it's really helpful if they can handle all the complicated custom stuff for you.
Yeah, customs can be a real headache, so it's awesome if the supplier can take care of that.
Definitely. So the sources break down navigating the wholesale world into three main things: reliability, flexibility, and transparency. Reliability means you need a supplier that consistently has what you need in stock and ships things on time. Like, let's say your business needs 20 boxes of glass bubblers every month. It's good to know that your supplier has those ready to go in their warehouse, maybe that one in LA, so you don't have to worry about running out of stock.
Okay.
That's probably why places like Clover Glass have their own warehouses in the US to avoid those shipping delays from overseas.
Yeah, a steady supply and knowing when your stuff will arrive is super important for any business.
Flexibility is important if you have special requests, like maybe you want custom packaging or your own logo on the products. If you want your own branding, you'll want to find a supplier that has a design team or glass blowers who can make your ideas a reality. Usually, you'd give them your logo and tell them what you want the product to look like. Then they'd make a sample for you to approve, and then they'd start making a bunch of them. It's also a good idea to ask how long it takes to make the products, because glass blowing can take a few weeks, plus the time it takes to ship.
Offering custom products is a great way to stand out from the crowd and build your own brand.
Totally. And then there's transparency. You want suppliers that are upfront about how much you have to order at once. Those minimum order quantities or MOQs and what their payment terms are like. Like they might ask for a 30% deposit and then the rest before they ship your order. Some suppliers might also have a minimum number of boxes you have to order, maybe like 20, so they can ship your stuff safely on a pallet and make sure nothing gets broken during shipping. And like we said before, a good supplier should be able to handle customs for you or at least help you through the process so you don't get hit with surprise fees or delays.
Yeah, it's so much easier when everyone's on the same page and there are no surprises.
Totally. And finally, the sources really emphasize how important good support is after you buy something. Glass is fragile, and even with careful packaging, things can break during shipping. So it's great if the supplier offers to replace or refund damaged items. They might even just ask you to send a picture of the broken stuff, and if it's their fault, they'll usually send you a new one or give you your money back. It's stuff like that that builds trust and makes you want to keep working with them. Knowing that your supplier cares about quality and keeping their customers happy means you can focus on your business and not worry about whether you'll have good products to sell.
Yeah, it's a huge relief to know that your supplier has your back.
So to sum it all up, making a homemade glass bubbler with stuff you already have is more than just a fun project. It's a way to really understand how water filtration works and what goes into making smoking accessories. And if you decide you want something fancier or if you need a reliable source for your business, all this info we talked about should give you a good starting point for finding a wholesale supplier. There are tons of resources out there for inventory, fast shipping, and help if you need it.
It's all about taking that first step and then seeing where it leads you.
Absolutely. And remember, please enjoy responsibly and always follow the rules and laws in your area. And here's a little something to think about. Now that you know how a simple thing like water filtration can change and even improve a common experience, what other simple things can you think of that could change or improve something else in your everyday life? It all starts with being curious and understanding the basics. Until next time, take care.